Oh, you're on all as well there, Dave?
Yes, I'm online, yes.
Okay, you're coming in clear. That's great.
Very good.
This is Jody. I'm on the line too.
Hey, Debbie, hear me okay?
I got you, Jay.
Sounds good, thank you.
Hi, Debbie. Sam with BDO is on the line.
Hi, Sam. Welcome.
I'll just stay muted until it's my time to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, Charmaine, can you please give us our countdown?
Absolutely. Have a great conference, everyone. 5, 4, 3.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order. It is February 22nd at 6 p.m. It's a regular Borough Assembly meeting, the second one of February. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Here.
Taylor?
Excused.
Chelsea?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
Okay, we have 6 assembly members calling in. The clerk is in the assembly chambers by herself today due to the code red status in the borough. So it's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. Okay, item 4, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented unless there is amendments.
So moved. So moved. I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to move forward with the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, opposed? Okay, I hear no opposition, so we will move forward. Item 5, public hearings. Public hearing for ordinance 2021-03. This is an ordinance amending chapter 4.60, Parks and Recreation User Fees of the Borough Code to update user fees for the community center. Is there anyone in the queue for this public hearing, Clerk Thompson?
Mayor Jensen, I do not see anyone in the queue saying they want to speak to the public hearing.
Okay, with that being said, then we will close the public hearing. Time for bid awards. There are 2 bid awards we're going to address this evening. The first bid award is for Blind Slough Hydroelectric Equipment Procurement Award, and this is recommended by Utility Director Hagerman. He's recommending the award the Blind Slough Hydroelectric Equipment Procurement Contract to Gilbert, Gykes, and Gordon Limited for a price of $2,002,396 with limited potential adjustment in accordance with the terms of the contract. I'd entertain a motion to approve this award.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Any discussion or questions of the Utility Director?
Yes, if I can, Mr. Mayor, I have 3 questions.
Okay, Member Lynn?
Right, and these are for Carl. The first one, is there any import-export that has to be done along with this particular project that would raise the cost or cause us problems?
Member Lynn, good question. I believe if there are any import or export duties that the vendor will be picking those up. Those were not, they did not come up in the negotiation process, and so I believe there are none to worry about, or they're very immaterial.
Okay, thank you. My second question for you is, if you go to page 5 of the vendor's recommendations, under item 6, it talks about Giles provides a model test report, 1978, but it is not clear that it is homologous with the proposed turbine. Apparently he didn't see that as a problem, or it wasn't addressed. Your thoughts on it, please.
Sure, another good question. So a lot of these vendors have been making their turbines for quite a number of years, and Jilks is definitely in that category. They've been in the business for quite a long time, and obviously they have a model test report from a turbine that was built in 1978, and it is basically their example of what they can do, and it fit the head and flow and the power requirements of our project, and so they brought that forward in their proposal. It's very expensive for these companies to develop those models, and so a lot of the vendors did that, proposed a model that wasn't all that recent. But the thing with their turbine design is that they will need to prove out that design to Petersburg with performance measures, and so with that being the case, the engineer was confident that any issues with the design would be sorted out in the submittal process and the performance testing.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. My last question for you is on page 8 of the report, and it's under number 1 on Giles. It goes down under, it should also be noted that the Eaton control alternative will not provide manual synchronizing controls of the generator. My question for you is, does that present a problem? I assume it didn't, since there was no...
Right. No, I do not believe that does propose a problem. We, the synchronization of a generator to the grid is what they're talking about there, and essentially, you know, we will, well, so many words, we'll push a button, and the generator will automatically synchronize with the grid and then connect. And so I don't think we're in danger of, coming up short on that. It's just a different way to do it. Right now, the operators can, have manual control of when to flip the switch and synchronize the generator. I'm trying to make this very simple, but and so in this proposed process, it would be controlled by a PLC, but the operators would still be telling the machine when to synchronize.
Okay, yes, that was part of my question, and thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, are there any other questions of Carl or any other discussion on the procurement award for Blind Sioux Hydro?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. I guess a question to Carl. So this is going to cost a little over $2 million. So can you kind of explain what the thought process is for paying for this, if we're going to do a bond in the fall, or just for the folks at home to understand how we're going to pay for it?
Right.
Thank you.
So Member Mucci, good question. So the funding of this project is, I guess we could say, pretty complicated at this present moment. The proposal that we got from Zilks was very good. As you can see, it was much more economical than the other proposals, and it met all the requirements, most of the requirements as from our RFP package. So we really wanted to take advantage of the good pricing that we saw, and so we're trying to move forward with locking in that price as long as we can. However, while we've transferred money into the capital project fund for this so that we can make this award, the goal of the department was to seek debt financing in order to pay for not only the equipment for this project, but also for the construction of the project. And that funding is not complete yet. So it was very important to tie in the equipment vendor into a long-term agreement that allows the borough to back out of the agreement if the financing does not come together for that. But we were successful in getting an agreement that will go out to October of 2022 in the long term, and in that time period from now to October 2022 is when I'll be working on that financing package to come together. That financing right now is proposed to be a bond sale to fully fund the equipment and the construction, and that process is lengthy. We have to finish the rate study or update the rate study for the department. That is a precursor to the bond bank arrangements, and then we have to get approval from the assembly and the voters to incur the debt of the bond sale. There's a lot of steps between now and then, and a lot of ways that the train could get derailed onto getting this project completed. But the ultimate goal is to seek a bond sale, to sell bonds for the purpose of funding this project, and at the outside, hopefully by October of 2022, we'll have that funding in place. We'll be able to get this vendor a notice to proceed to start building this equipment, and then at the same time, we've got issues with our FERC license. We need to do an amendment to our FERC licensing, and also develop a bid package for the construction, for basically the installation of the equipment that we're looking at tonight. It's a very complicated project at this point, and we're trying to pull it together, take advantage of this pricing, but it's going to take a while, and there are plenty of opportunities for the borough to back out if something goes sour as far as funding goes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Carl.
Is there any other discussion or questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Kinsinger.
Yes, this would be for Carl. So would the project, would the bond be paid for by dedicating a percentage of the sale of electricity, or would it be a bond paid by the property owners?
Oh, another very good question. Because the Power and Light is an enterprise fund, there would be no taxes used in the repayment of that bond. The rates of the utility will be used to repay that debt.
Thank you. And a follow-up question. I know you haven't gone out for bid for the construction segment of it, but do you have any wild estimates on how much that portion would cost? Or is it just too early to know yet?
Well, our engineer did put an estimate on that. I don't have that in front of me. I should have. I've been busy today with some other things, unfortunately. But I want to say that the construction estimate was right around $2 million as well. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that's roughly the cost of construction, and that would include demolition of existing equipment and doing some reworking of the concrete inside the powerhouse, mounting the equipment that the turbine, the generator, the new nozzle system, all of the electrical components, the switchgear that is included in this bid. It's basically a rework of every piece of equipment in that powerhouse. So it's takes some specialized subcontractors and obviously some mobilization to the site. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments by assembly members? I have a question for you, Carl. At any point, will we be using any of the balance in the Power and Light Enterprise Fund? Will we use that for the construction, for instance?
My original approach to that was going to be to provide some matching funds from the reserves of the Power and Light Department for this project, and I had planned on, I believe, to use about 30% of the total cost of the project from our reserves in the Power and Light, and I believe that came out to be about $1.5 million to put towards this work to not go after a bond for the entire amount. And so to date, we have expended, I want to say approximately $700,000, $650,000 or so of our own monies, and we've transferred some additional funds from our reserves into the Capital Project Fund to be able to consider this award tonight. But as I mentioned, when that transfer took place, the goal is to do a financing package so that any excess money above that matching amount can be returned to the reserve fund, and the utility just moving forward with a certain amount of debt to repay.
Okay, thank you. Any other input from Assembly or any other questions? Will the clerk call the roll?
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor? Oh, sorry, excused. Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, that bid award passes unanimously with a 6-0 vote. That brings us to item 6B, Motor Pool Shop Fire Damage Repair Project Award. Public Works Director Otter recommends award of the Motor Pool Shop Fire Damage Repair Project to Rainforest Contracting for an amount not to exceed $1,130,450. I would entertain a motion to approve this award.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I have one question, for Chris.
Okay, Member Kinsinger?
Yes, I noticed here that the amount, is a little bit over from what we believe we will get for insurance. And I was just wondering if Chris could let the public know what the additional improvements in the facility are gonna be.
Okay, you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so there were three additive alternates, to this project that went, beyond, what was damaged by the fire, and therefore, are items that the borough would have to pay for. Additive alternate number one was to expand the size of the tire sheds and then insulate, the east side tire shed, because we're gonna put the air compressor in that shed. So that insulation will help us get a longer life out of the compressor. A lot of the stuff that we need to store in those tire sheds had been outside before, and so we feel like making them a little bit bigger will allow us to get most everything that needs to be stored in there, under cover. Additive alternate number two, was to grind down, the concrete floor inside the shop area, the main shop floor. It's got a lot of decades of wear and tear on it. Portions of the floor are uneven enough that the mechanics can't use a creeper. That was something we had talked about before the fire. It was a need that we had there, and, this is just a good opportunity to do that work while we've got everything all torn apart. And, it's gonna be kind of a messy job. Best time to do that is when everybody's out of there and things are already being demolished. So that's additive alternate number two. And additive alternate number three, was to do some work on the stairs inside the building. Again, that's, just replacing, portions of the stairs that are worn out, kind of needed to be done, but we're not damaged by the fire, but, while there's no one using the building, this is just a good opportunity to get in there and do that work. So those are the three additive alternates. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Any other discussion? I'd like to add, this low bidder is a local contractor, and the nearest bid to that was like $450,000 higher, so it's nice to have local work. So if there's no other discussion or questions, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes,
Bob?
Yes,
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the project award for the motor pool shop repair, passes unanimously with a 6-0 vote. That now brings us to item 7 on the agenda, and that's persons to be heard related to items on the agenda. And for people listening that are in the queue ready to talk, the clerk will be keeping, time, and it's a 5-minute time limit. You'll hear one, ring of a bell 30 seconds before your time is up, and then there'll be 2 rings of the bell, and then your time will be up, and I'll ask you to, finish up your testimony. And during these testimonies, you will be addressing the whole assembly, and please keep your testimony, courteous. So, Clerk Thompson, is there anyone in the queue?
There is not for items related to the agenda.
Okay, then we will move on to item 8, and this is persons to be heard unrelated to the agenda, and we will use the same guidelines for this.
Yes, Charmaine, if you could please unmute Brittany Collum.
The line is now open.
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, 1 second here. I'm I've got my baby on my back here. We're good. Sorry. Anyway, I'm calling in today in regards to COVID, I guess related items in general. Today in particular, I guess, is kind of proven what I want to talk about just briefly here. I guess I'm a little frustrated, and I'm hoping this all kind of comes out clearly and tactfully for you all. But there's a lot of fears, and I would say misleading, coming from those that are in, I guess I'll just use the word power right now. We have, yes, a lot of cases in town right now, but those cases are all based on faulty testing, are all based on really no symptoms to speak of. And now we're kind of throwing in there that there's been hospitalizations, but from what I'm hearing, a lot of those symptoms, or those hospitalizations are not due to COVID. They happen to test positive for COVID. So that's very misleading for people. And I guess in essence, in summary, we're dealing with a virus that has a survival rate of 99%. So I don't really understand why the fear is continually being spread in this town. And now, especially with the governor lifting all the mandates, I don't see why Petersburg needs to continue on with this, I'll just say, craziness. If people want to continue masking, if they want to get shots, if they want to continue going down that road, that's great. But please don't expect everyone to continue doing all that. It's really hurting lives. It's hurting mental health. It's hurting people to keep living in this state of fear, and it's all for nothing, really. Masks have been shown not to be that effective. The vaccine apparently doesn't work either because people are still getting sick. So when does this stop? And I'm just asking you all to take a look at what you're doing to this town. This used to be a place where you could raise kids, and it was great for that, but I'm really starting to question that. I'm seeing a lack of, I guess, discernment and sanity, really, from those that are making calls. And I'm seeing a lot of dishonesty as well. And I know that's a big thing to say, but that's what's being shown to us is there's very little trust left for me in those that are making decisions. Of course, that's not the case for everyone that's an elected official at this point, but I mean, not even elected, but coming from even places like the hospital, I'm starting to question a lot of the calls that are being made. So I had something written out, but like I said, I had my baby on my back and my notes are kind of gone by the wayside here, so that's probably very scattered. But I guess the point I'm trying to get across is I'm tired of it, and I would really appreciate more honesty and more forthcoming and less fear from I guess those in office and those in the EOC and those that are pushing all this on us. And enough is enough. Let's lift the oppression. I just don't expect everyone to play along with this forever. So thanks for your time and have a good evening.
Thanks for your testimony this evening. Clerk Thompson, will you have the operator unmute the next caller, please?
Yes, Mayor Jensen, first I should let you know that the caller that we're going to unmute was on earlier, dropped off, and now is back. And it does say that she wants to speak to items related to the agenda. But Charmaine, if you could please unmute Donna Marsh.
I was actually hoping to speak to items unrelated to the agenda.
Oh, perfect.
I don't know if this is the appropriate place. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for the time to share and listen to my point of view. It's always appreciated in board meetings for those who have the opportunity to give vote to have a second prior to discussing issues. I have served on a number of boards, and that's always a good thing to do. Not doing so may be legal under Robert's Rules of Order, but it really doesn't create a positive rapport with the people they represent. Secondly, if at every spike, sniffle, cold, or fever, and by spike I mean COVID spike, one or more community residents experience, we shut down business, school, and life, the after effects will be felt for a really long time. Small business thrives in healthy economies with people providing services and goods that benefit whole societies. A government who wields such control as to dictate as to who is important enough to remain open, who is important enough to go to work, and who is important enough to support a particular business or industry has far too much power, regardless of the justification to which they did so. Another point, we don't live in the 19th century. For good or bad, here we are, 21st century. Our kids need to go to school. They need to learn how to learn to be critical thinkers, to discover truth, to explore, to have opportunities to mingle with other people, other children, and learn skills that other adults besides their families and their parents can help them. For years, our education system in Petersburg has been touted as one of the top in the state and has received kudos from time to time across the nation. We've had great teachers, support staff, and a wide and varied curriculum. Online learning for many of our students just doesn't cut it. Too many of our kids don't have the help of family members or other caring adults in their lives to help them thrive in an online learning situation. I think the school administration is very aware of that, but I wonder if the governing body, the powers that be, the EOC, the Assembly, fully comprehends that. School shutdowns, even for short periods, short-circuit the whole system. Another point I have is traveling from one town to another, one state to another, for whatever reason, without restriction, has been part of the American dream for 200 plus years. We call it freedom. A government who restricts this is guilty of tremendous overreach. Another point, for all the COVID cases, how many are actually sick? For those who have a required hospitalization, and my heart goes out to those who have suffered the effects of themselves or loved ones having acquired this bug. How many, truthfully, were there for other issues but had to test before being seen and were then considered a positive case? Anecdotally, I've heard of many cases where this has been the norm, not just in our town, but in other areas. And my last point is the coronavirus in all its variations, and it's been around a long time, is here to stay. People will get it, people may die from it, and most people survive very well after having acquired it. I would urge the council, the EOC, and those who are making decisions for the residents of Petersburg to let life continue. People thrive in having the opportunity to decide for themselves what they want to do, where they will travel, to whom they will, where they will spend their money, and the whole bit. So I would urge the governing bodies to rethink the direction, trajectory they are heading. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your testimony this evening. Clerk Thompson, are there other people in the queue?
There are not, Mayor Jensen.
Okay, with that being said, we will close the public testimony for persons to be heard related and unrelated to agenda items. Item 9 on the agenda, board, commission, and committee reports. There are none this evening. There are no items on the consent agenda, which brings us to item 11, report of other officers. It's now time for BDO CEO Sam, I don't have his last name up, Sam Thompson, to give us our annual review of the audit.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me just fine?
You're coming in clear on this phone.
Perfect. I can hear you mine as well. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Sam Thompson. I'm an auditor with BDO, and yes, I am here to give the report over the fiscal year 2020 audit. So first off, I just would like to say thank you to members of the Assembly and members of management for the opportunity to be of service to the Borough for another year. We greatly appreciate the relationship we've had with the Borough, and we look forward to many more years of service. I want to give a big thank you to Jody Tao and the entire finance department for their assistance throughout the audit. The Borough was very well prepared, very responsive, and a pleasure to work with. I'll just go through kind of a brief summary, and then I'll dive into the financial statements. At any point, if there's any questions, please feel free to interrupt, and I'd be happy to answer those. So first off, just to provide a summary, we have completed our audit. We issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements and the Borough's major federal programs. We issued an unmodified opinion, and that opinion is the highest level of assurance we can professionally provide. With that, we mean that we've found the borough's financial statements to be materially correct. Now, we do perform our audit in accordance with reasonable assurance, not absolute. It would be virtually impossible for us to verify every single last dollar. So therefore, we work in terms of materiality, and we've issued our opinion in terms of materiality. We encounter no instances in which we are unable to complete our planned audit procedures. All requested documents were provided to us. All our questions were answered in a timely manner. We are required to go over and disclose any audit adjustments that we did find incorrect throughout the audit, as well as adjustments that we brought to the attention of management that were not corrected. We did identify 6 corrected misstatements that were made by management, so those are reflected in the financial statements. We did identify 2 other misstatements that were immaterial and management elected not to correct. These 2 uncorrected misstatements did not have an impact on our audit report. We still were able to issue an unmodified opinion. Full disclosure, we provide an audit of the borough's financial statements as a whole. Those financial statements also include the financial balances of Petersburg School District as well as Petersburg Medical Center. BDO also does audit Petersburg School District. We issued an unmodified opinion over those school district's financial statements. BDO does not audit Petersburg Medical Center. However, we do review those balances and make sure that information is correctly presented in the borough-wide financial statements. And we do understand that the auditor of Petersburg's Medical Center also issued an unmodified opinion over the medical center's financial statements. Finally, we are required to evaluate internal controls over financial reporting. Now, internal controls are the processes and procedures that management has in place that help ensure that the financial information presented in the financial statements is correct, complete, and accurate. We do not issue an opinion over internal controls. However, if we are made aware or discover any deficiencies in internal controls that we consider to be either significant or material, we would then be required to disclose those to the Assembly. I'm happy to report we did not come across any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls. We find that the borough's internal controls over financial reporting are sound and in accordance with professional standards. With that, I'd like to move on to the financial statement. So I understand that members of the Assembly either have a physical copy of the statements or they might be looking at a PDF version or electronic copy of the statement. So with that, when I make page number references, I will give both the printed page number as well as the PDF page number. So hopefully everyone can follow along. So if you have a copy of the financial statements, if you could go to page 1 of the printed statements, which is page 10 of the PDF, and this page is titled the Independent Auditor's Report, and it has BDO's corporate logo at the top. So the first pages 1 through 3 or 10 through 12 of the PDF, this is our Independent Auditor's Report. So this is our report to the Assembly and to all users of the financial statements. And in this report, it does disclose that we issued an unmodified opinion, and it discloses what our responsibility is over the financial statements as well as what management's responsibility is. For the most part, it's a pretty standard, straightforward audit report. And again, the main takeaway here is we did issue an unmodified opinion over all the borough's financial statement reporting units. So moving on, if everyone could please turn to page 20 of the printed statements or page 29 of the PDF, I'll go over the statement of net position. So the statement of net position can also be referred to as a balance sheet, and what it does is it shows the borough's, as a snapshot in time as of June 30th, 2020, of the borough's assets, liabilities, and ending net position or equity. So there's quite a few numbers on these pages. I'll just point out a few of the more important numbers, and I think the Assembly should be made aware of. The first would be the borough's total assets. So you see total assets for the year was $153,632,583. Now, the majority of this is tied up in either land, construction in progress, or other capital assets. So these are property, plant, and equipment, not tangible items, but items that can't easily be converted into cash. The borough did have over $35.9 million in cash and investments, so this is a good, healthy amount that allows the borough to make sure you maintain adequate liquidity in order to pay your current and non-current obligations into the future. Going on to the next page, you'll see total liabilities for the year was $24,654,022. Now, these liabilities are made up of a variety of different accounts. The Borough does report its proportionate share of the statewide PERS pension liability, as well as other post-employment benefit, or OPEB liability. So the combined net pension and net OPEB liability is just over $9.4 million. I like to point this number out because while it is a very large liability and is very material to the Borough as a whole, this is a liability that won't be paid anytime soon. What I mean by that is it's not like a bond or a note payable where you have a finite payment schedule and you have a certain date and time where you're required to make a final payment to pay that liability off. So this liability will be paid over several years and will go up and down depending on investment returns and actuarial assumptions made by PERS. Eventually, when the last individual in the PERS plan, in the defined benefit plan, is no longer with us, liability will go down to zero, but that probably won't be for another 30 or 40 years. So this number, as I mentioned, is over $9 million this year. And in terms of its impact on the Borough's budget and cash flows in future periods, the Borough will continue to pay in 22% of covered payroll to PERS annually. This is a required payment now to fund this liability, so that allows the Borough to adequately budget and account for the future cash flows related to the liability. Other significant liabilities to point out are the bonds payable and loans payable. No new debt was issued in 2020. Debt was issued subsequent to year-end refunding debt. However, you can see the total bonds payable was over $6 million and loans payable was over approximately $4 million. Overall, though, total equity in the government-wide statements was well over $100 million. Total net position was $130 million. Now, most of this is tied up in capital assets. However, there is approximately $21.9 million of unrestricted net position. So this is equity that the management and the assembly has at their disposal to use in future periods as they best see fit. Moving on to the next two pages, you'll find the statement of activities, and this is this shows the revenue and expenses for the year. If you could go to page 23 of the printed statements or page 32 of the PDF, you'll see the overall change in net position in the total column was a positive $825,913. So this you can refer to this as net income for the government as a whole. So it's always good to show a positive number. I will point out though, if it were not for the special item shown directly above, which is the net insurance recovery on capital assets of $953,688, the change in net position would have been slightly negative for the year. So speaking of the special item, the insurance recovery on capital assets net, what this represents is the proceeds that the Borough received from your insurance provider related to the motor pool building fire, net of the net book value of the asset that was impaired. So the asset that was damaged was impaired. What that means is it was written down to zero. And just given how old the asset was and the amount of accumulated depreciation that had been incurred over time, it resulted in a fairly large net change for the year of $953,000. I did mention right before I started speaking, however, though, it seems that the Borough has gone out and is going to enter into an agreement with a contractor to come in and repair the building. So that will eat up all the insurance recovery proceeds that fell to net position in 2020 during fiscal year 2021. So moving on, those are the government-wide statements and take into account all the funds. Going on to page 24 of the PDF, 24 of the printed statements, 33 of the PDF, you'll find the balance sheet for the governmental funds. So the main number I want to point out here is the general fund's total unassigned fund balance of $5,738,456. So the general fund, of course, is the main operating fund of the Borough. This is the amount of fund balance that the Assembly has to use in 2021 as they best see fit. This is a strong, healthy number, and to put this number into perspective, if you were to compare it to the total expenditures in the general fund as well as transfers out in 2020, which totaled over $9 million, the unassigned fund balance at year-end represents approximately 7 months worth of general fund expenditures and transfers out. So in some sort of doomsday scenario where the general fund not to receive any additional funds in a future year, that's the amount of reserves you have on hand to continue paying your bills and making and paying the expenses that you have before you'd start running a deficit. So 7 months is a nice strong reserve. Anytime you're over 3 months, that's good. 6 months, very healthy. 7 months, even better. So that speaks to sound fiscal management by both management and the assembly, maintaining such a strong fund balance at year end. Moving on to page 26 of the printed statements, 35 of the PDF, you'll see the income statement or the operating statement for the general fund. So you'll see here that revenues did exceed expenditures by well over 2.3 million. I will point out part of this has to do with the fact that there were a significant amount of expenditures that were originally budgeted for the general fund that were ended up paid for using the CARES Act funding that was reported as its own special revenue fund. So with that, the expenditures in the general fund are slightly below what they otherwise would have been had the CARES Act fund not been around. So you'll see in the next column over, the CARES Act Special Revenue Fund did recognize $835,000 worth of revenue for the year, which is almost exactly equal to the expenditures incurred or paid for using the CARES Act fund. Now, given the timing of the CARES Act program and this grant, there will be revenue available in fiscal year 2021, so most likely this fund will be major again next year, and you'll see an even greater number in terms of revenue for the CARES Act fund as well as expenditures. Those are the governmental fund statements. I'll touch very briefly on the proprietary funds. These are the borough's enterprise funds, just because there hasn't been a lot of movement versus prior years. So if you could please turn to page 31 of the printed statements, page 40 of the PDF. One number I like to point out is just that all of the enterprise funds did have a book operating loss for the year. You'll see loss from operations for all 6 of those funds. One thing I like to point out, though, is if you back out the depreciation, which is an expense under governmental accounting standards, but is a non-cash item. If you back out the depreciation expense, I believe all the funds except the assisted living fund would have shown a positive income from operations. So from a cash flow basis, the enterprise funds are trending in a positive direction. However, depreciation, a non-cash item, is what is tipping those funds for an operating loss for the year. Those are the basic statements. Now, as you'll see, there are quite a few pages of notes. I believe the notes are valuable information. However, for everyone's time, I won't go over all of them in detail. I would like to draw attention, though, to page 70 of the printed statements or page 79 of the PDF. There are 2 new notes this year, and one has to do with the coronavirus pandemic, note 14, and then note 15 is the CARES Act. So if you were to look at any audited financial statement, you would find a variation of these notes across all sorts of different entities. So the coronavirus pandemic note, what the borough is disclosing here is just historical information related to the pandemic, as well as how the known impact of the pandemic in fiscal year 20, as well as the unknown or the anticipated impact in 2021. Now, no numbers are disclosed in this note because it's not possible to quantify the future impact. However, it's very likely, though, that the pandemic will continue to have an impact into 2021 and potentially beyond. Therefore, that's the purpose for showing this note in the borough statements. Now, note 15, the CARES Act note, provides a quick summary of what the CARES Act is, the amount of funding that the borough received, and the source of that funding. It was through the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which was part of the $150 billion nationwide program that was specific to state, local, and tribal governments. So you can see the amount that Petersburg received and the amount that was expended in fiscal year 2020. So with that, I'll shift gears from the financial statement audit to the single audit. So we are required, or the borough is also required to have a federal single audit in accordance with the federal uniform guidance. The borough has this audit every year, and every year we look at a different program based off of the amount of dollars expended in a certain risk profile. So the major program this year for the borough was the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So with that, what that means is we did a special audit where we focused solely on the coronavirus relief funds and how those funds were were expended and accounted for. So I'm happy to report we issued an unmodified opinion over our audit of the coronavirus relief fund, and we found that all the funds were expended in accordance with the rules and regulations of the program, and those funds are accounted for correctly. So with that, that's the extent of my prepared remarks. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions anyone on the assembly might have.
Are there any questions of the auditor this evening? Well, I don't hear any questions, so thank you for your presentation.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was muted and talking to myself. If I could ask one question?
Sure.
Yes, I'd like to say that I found this very easy to read and understand, and thank you very much for putting it in a format that was relatively easy to digest for somebody that doesn't deal with something like this on a daily basis. And I don't know if you're able to answer this or not, but my curiosity is, where are we sitting in terms of our liability with PERS in relation to other communities in Southeast Alaska? Are we about average, below average, or how do we sit in that? I guess if you had to put it on a graph.
Oh, that's a great question. So, how the liability is allocated amongst all participating employers, and I believe there's about over 150 in PERS alone. It's based off a projection of future payments made into the plan. So the PERS actuaries, they have the historical data of how much each employer has participated into the plan, and they've projected that out over the next, I believe, 23 years. And that's how they'll allocate the liability going forward. So with that, the liability, really what it boils down to is the size of your community and the size of your workforce and what you've been paying in terms of covered payroll to your employees and PERS. So with that, you can expect that Petersburg falls below, say, City Borough of Juneau or City and Borough of Sitka in terms of its overall net pension liability. But your liability is greater than those of, say, City and Borough of Wrangell or City and Borough of Yakutat, just given that those are smaller entities and have smaller payrolls. But it is a mathematical calculation, and give me 1 second, I'll tell you exactly what the borough's share of the overall liability is. So for the year ended, the borough's proportionate share of the net pension liability was 0.17%, or 0.16669% to be exact, of the overall liability as a whole. So, of course, the PERS liability as a whole is several $1 billion, but the borough's share of that is just over $9 million.
Okay, so it's so basically every community that participates in PERS pays the same percentage then, and so that's
yes, correct.
That's
every
your liability.
Yeah, they pay 22% of their covered payroll. So everyone pays the same proportionate share, unless a community were to fall into arrears and miss payments, but that is rare.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Thompson this evening? Hearing none, thank you for your report. That moves us on to item C. There's no B for some reason, but item C under report of other officers, and that's will be from Member Kinsinger. Member Kinsinger and Manager Giesbrecht both attended most of Southeast Conference, but Member Kinsinger is going to give us a report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, for everybody listening, Southeast Conference is an organization. It's a rather unique organization in that it provides a forum for all the governments and tribes and businesses to kind of get together and share ideas and hear what's going on in the rest of the region. I guess the two main takeaways that I'd like to share with the Assembly tonight was one report, or quite a few reports, on the other devastations that the lack of cruise ships coming to the region are going to cause some of our sister cities. Fortunately, here in Petersburg, our economy does not rely upon large cruise ships, and probably never will. But several of the communities that do rely upon them are facing substantial economic hardship. And my biggest concern, or my big takeaway from that, was the impact on small local businesses that are going to have a really hard time of making it through this year if there's not a resumption in some of the larger cruise ships going to their communities this summer. And the mid-session summit normally focuses on talking to our politicians, state and national. And I found it pretty interesting. It seems that there's, as everybody's probably heard, there's quite a bit of chaos going on in Juneau again this year. Fortunately, the House is organized, but even in the individual caucuses, there's still a lot of dissension on how we're going to pay for government this year, state government. So the big question that's looming is, you know, how much money are we going to take out of the permanent fund? How much money are we going to give in a PFD? And if you put it up on a dartboard, you could throw a dart up there and get a different answer, and one of those has probably already been proposed. So I think it's something we need to keep a close eye on. The one interesting takeaway that I took was the opinion that a lot of people, particularly in the rail belt, that have been very resistant to any broad-based taxes are starting to realize that we're going to have some taxes at some point in the future. Unfortunately, the majority of the residents in the rail belt prefer a sales tax. And the problem with that is that 90 communities in the rest of the state rely upon sales tax to fund government. So to me, that's a very big thing that we need to keep an eye on, because if you just look at this previous financial report, that's how we derive a lot of our income to run our government. So I think we need to keep an eye on that, and we need to make sure we have our lobbyists aware of our position on that going forward. And that's about all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Kinsinger. The next report is from Member Mucci, the Sea Otter Working Group report. Do you have anything to report this evening, Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have much to report. The meeting is this coming Thursday from 9 to 11 on the telephone, and it's just a quarterly meeting, where they coordinate information about sea otter management and research activities. And so they've got a date set for this coming Thursday, and if there's anything of interest to report back, I'll report back anyway, but it's going to be this Thursday, and I'll let you know if anything interesting happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that will be the first meeting of the group then? That will be this Thursday?
I think so. They met in November of 2019. There was a big in-person meeting, I think, up in Juneau. But this is kind of getting everybody back together, kind of trying to figure out what they want to do. Of course, there's all kinds of federal and state agencies trying to coordinate stuff. So, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But, this is the first one I've been involved with.
Okay, thank you. It'll be interesting to see what you guys discuss. Brings us to the mayor's report, pretty short today. Petersburg Borough Municipal Land Entitlement Selections, preliminary decision of the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, and it's on the agenda, and it's a pretty long document, and if you wanted an accurate explanation, you could get that from Liz Cabrera. But DNR has released their preliminary decision on the borough's selections of state-owned land to be conveyed to the borough under Alaska Statute 29.65.010. A copy of the preliminary decision is attached to this report. Next item on the mayor's report, Alaska Natives Without Land legislation. It appears like our congressional delegation, basically Senator Murkowski, is planning on reintroducing this bill this year. It sounds like there will be public comment, and that has not the time, the date for that has not been determined. Manager Giesbrick and I and Mayor Przunka and Manager Lisa Von Bargen from Wrangell are having a phone conversation with John Crowther's, the gal that's in his position now, the Senator Murkowski's state director. So we'll fill you in on the news and keep everybody informed on what's going on there with that issue. Seeking letters of interest. The Assembly is seeking letters of interest from Borough residents who wish to serve the community by filling a vacant seat on the following boards or commissions until October 2021 municipal election. Planning Commission, there's 1 vacant seat. Public Safety Advisory Board, there's still 2 vacant seats. And letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the Borough office located at 12 South Nordic Drive or by mailing to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or by emailing to dthompson at petersburg.gov. I wanted to mention that I will be out of town from mid-March till the first part of April, and on the agenda this evening, we are talking about changing meeting dates for March. Even if we did that, I will still be here for the first meeting, and depending on where we're at in the herring fishery, I could potentially call in for the second meeting in March and the first meeting in April. So that's about it for the mayor's report. Are there any questions or any assembly members?
I have one question, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. In regard to the Alaska Native Without Land legislation, when this legislation was being pushed towards the end of the last session, there were several comments about, well, the congressional delegation needed to hear from the communities. Is there going to be a point here as we move down this road, if that is going to be the case here, to have a community meeting I know it's a little difficult now, but, to at least get community input on a topic like this? I mean, we seem to be we were behind the 8 ball here when the legislation was moving forward, and it just seems to me that this would be the time of year to kind of get it out there to what Petersburg wants. I was just curious about that.
Well, I guess what we'll have to do, in my opinion, is now that it looks like they are going to be taking public comment before they reintroduce the bill again. That's what it sounds like coming from the Senator Murkowski's office. We will know more after our phone discussion, and then we will definitely, I think, municipalities will have an opportunity to weigh in on their concerns as well as individuals. But like I said, when as it moves along, it sounds like potentially this spring they would like to have these public hearings and public input. So we'll know more after the conversation we're going to have. So yeah,
sure.
It'll be on the next mayor's report what we find out.
Sure. So, Mr. Mayor, just to follow up here, should the community of Petersburg use the maps that were proposed during this last legislative session as something to comment on, or should they just wait to see what legislation is coming out? Perhaps maybe there'll be new areas, or are we just going off the old maps?
That's a good question, and we'll see what the legislation, what they propose to introduce. So that's a question we can ask, if the maps are going to be the same or if they can be modified by public input, or how that's going to go. I think this is going to be a fairly lengthy discussion, I would think, if they're genuinely wanting public input.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you for the question. If there's no other questions, I'll turn it over to Manager Giesbrick for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sandy continues to work with Petersburg Medical Center on vaccinations and asymptomatic testing. Prior to our latest outbreak, we actually were able to adjust our fire station protocols for COVID and had the fire station back open for certain actions, and we were accepting some visitors. That is closed down at the moment, but we expect to open it back up after we get a handle on our latest COVID issues. 2 fire engines, 1 ambulance, several personal vehicles, and 16 department members responded to the fire on February 16th. After the fire, the crew came back to the fire station and spent quite a bit of time cleaning and servicing the equipment to get it back in shape. Thanks to those volunteers who selflessly got out of bed and were late to work so they could help. Also, a special thanks goes out to Mark and Kirsten Testoni for their hospitality to the 3 people who escaped the fire and for the responders on the scene. Parks and Rec will be hosting another lifeguard class with Aaron Hankins during spring break. Please contact Stephanie Payne at Parks and Rec at 772-5445 or spayne@petersburgak.gov. The library was originally closed for annual inventory and maintenance this week. That will continue, but we're also closed because of the COVID issue. We will update the community if that extends through past the weekend. Homeport Electronics has replaced and upgraded all of the library's interior video cameras. The exterior cameras will be done in the next month. Also, thanks to Mattingly Electric and Rain Country Contracting for their help in getting the library's snowmelt system back online. Alaska Housing Finance Corporation Rent Relief Program is accepting applications. Petersburg renters that make less than $63,920 a year may be eligible for relief payments for rent and or utilities for up to a year, including rent that is past due. Applications will be accepted until March 5th at 11:59 p.m. Additional information is available by calling or texting the word relief to 1-833-440-0420. Check your eligibility and apply today at alaskahousingrelief.org. Outcomes from the borough's CARES Act nonprofit and child care provider grants. Based on those reports from grant recipients, those grant funds covered 32 and a half months of employee payroll, 9.5 months of rent mortgage, 23 months of utility service, purchase of PPEs, and purchase of other operating supplies. Outcomes from the borough's Act Child Care Assistance for Families grant, approximately 60 families assisted, an average of 47 children per month between September and December. Thank you to Petersburg Mental Health Services for administering that program. As the mayor mentioned, the municipal entitlement DNR had issued a preliminary decision on 1,832 acres of state-owned land that we had selected, conveying 1,452 acres, postponed conveyance of 218 acres, and rejected 143 acres. Comments on the preliminary decision are due on March 12th. The Visitor Industry Management Plan from PEDC has released the final version of the plan. It may be downloaded from the borough website, and look forward to people taking a look at it and letting us know what they think. The inmate video visitation is being installed at the police department soon. This allows people to visit an inmate in our jail without the person leaving their cell or at least leaving the secure area. The third grade came down to the police department for a tour of the police department and jail, and of course the police vehicles. Petersburg Police Department thanks the third grade for the many thank you letters they received. Our department received its certification letter from the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement. This is a new requirement as part of the Executive Order on Safe Policing. The certification is good for 3 years and makes us eligible for federal grants. The certified departments will all be listed on a database with the Department of Justice. Wastewater staff found a leak in the small forced main on Dock Street pier that is used by the Coast Guard to pump black water from their vessels into the wastewater collection system. They have come up with a plan for repairs and parts are on order. A large groundwater leak at the manhole connection from Bayview Estates at Hungerford Hill was located by staff. The subdivision owner and their contractor were notified of the need to correct this condition. Power and Light Mechanics flew up to Crystal Lake Dam to replace a heater that was not keeping up with the near zero temperatures in the valve house. The new heater is working well to prevent any freezing conditions with the equipment. During that cold snap, we hit peak loading for both the regional and local electrical systems. It reached an all-time high. SEPA recorded a peak of just over 46 megawatts, and Petersburg recorded a peak of 13.1 megawatts. Lakes are still showing healthy water levels, and we're watching that closely in case it gets cold again. Property assessments will be mailed at the end of this month. Property owners will have 1 month to review and appeal, and appeal forms can be found on the borough's website. Harbor staff has been working with the Corps of Engineers, setting up logistics for the South Harbor dredge sampling as required by EPA. The Corps is hoping EPA will okay sampling to occur in late April, early May, and will require upwards of 9 months to complete the testing of soil samples. At this point, the dredge project has been pushed to the fall, winter of 2022. Medicaid audit completed and in the mail to the state for the assisted living and elderly housing, and Sheelan is working on the recertification, which is due March 1st. The quilt raffle was on Valentine's Day. A big thank you to everyone who bought tickets and supported our deck project. 9 beautiful quilts were given new homes. Last week at elderly housing, we had a pipe in the wall behind a resident shower fixture spring a leak, which turned into a geyser, not gold related. Thanks to Brian Haley and Ty Cummings, who came to the rescue and got us back up and the problem fixed. And that's all for me. Hello?
I'm still here, Steve.
Hello? I had to unmute myself, talking to myself like
okay.
Member Kensler was. So, thank you, Manager Giesbrecht. Are there any questions of the manager this evening on his report? Okay, hearing none. That brings us to item 14, which is unfinished business. Ordinances for third and final reading. One ordinance, Ordinance 2021-01, an ordinance amending provisions of Chapter 4.28, Sales Tax of the Borough Code to update for new online sales tax filings and change due dates and times of filing. What this does is give people an electronic option. So that changes some dates for deadlines for mailing or bringing hard copies in. So that being said, I'd entertain a motion to adopt Ordinance 2021-01 in its third and final reading.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on Ordinance 2021-01?
Just a quick note.
Member
Not
Tremblay.
necessarily on the, yeah, thank you. Just that I wanted to report that my boss used it for the bookstore and she reported it's, quote, very slick. So I just wanted to pass that along. No notes on the actual ordinance itself, but thought the hard work on this was appreciated.
Thank you. Any discussion on the proposed ordinance? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2021-01 passes in its third and final reading with a unanimous vote of 6-0. And that brings us up under unfinished business ordinances for second reading. That's ordinance 2021-03. This is an ordinance amending chapter 4.60 Parks and Recreation user fees of the Borough Code to update user fees for the community center. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the user fees ordinance for Parks and Rec?
Yes,
Mr.
please,
Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, sir. Just to kind of rehash briefly some of the comments I made during the first reading. I like the ordinance, and I appreciate the efforts of both Manager Giesbrecht, who had been acting in that role as a Parks and Rec director, and now Director Payne have put into this. And as I mentioned last time, having spoke with them, that amendment was made and passed to for those under the age of 18 to let that be free of charge. Annual passes for individuals, as we can see in there, will generate revenue. If we'll know over time if this will be a sustainable model or not if this passes. I'm hopeful that it will. But what I'm most excited about, though, the way it's written right now, is making our community gym facilities available to all young members of our community, regardless of their income and/or ability to pay. And it really puts our money where our mouth is in terms of really investing in the health and wellness of our. So I'm hoping it passes in the second reading, and if it does pass in the third reading, by the time the third reading comes, I would really like to hear more from the community on that. I've gotten a few emails and calls, but since we didn't have anything during the public hearing tonight, I look forward to more people chiming in. That's all, and thank you.
Any other comments or input by assembly members?
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know Parks and Rec Advisory Board hasn't had a chance to weigh in on it yet, but it would be really helpful for me if I could just have just a short report from them after their next meeting to say, yeah, we think this is a good idea and we'd like to move forward. I think we need to make sure that we involve the advisory board on this, and it would be helpful for me if they had a chance to comment on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Ordinance 2021-03? And I think it's a good ordinance, but it's going to be interesting to see in the long run how the fees pan out and if it's affordable. So with that being said, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Ordinance 2021-03 passes unanimously in its second reading. That brings us to item 15 on this evening's agenda, and that's new business. The first item on the agenda is Marine Land Lease Amendment Request. And
just so I can
there's
hit.
a change to this.
But I'm not going to speak on speakerphone though.
So I hear someone talking. We can have a motion to get it on the floor like it is and then make an amendment to add the square footage required by the fire marshal, or do it all in one motion. So I would leave that up to the maker of the motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, I'd move to accept this ordinance with the changes that the city clerk provided us this afternoon. Do you want me to read them, or how best to go forward here?
I would prefer that, so the people listening, and then for the sake of getting it on the floor properly, what we need to do is add 20 feet to the north side, and that's why I thought it might be cleaner if we just go as it is and amend it. But so yeah, come up with the motion, and we'll see if we get a second, and we'll go from there. So
yeah, how about if I just make a motion to accept Ordinance 2021-03?
Actually, this is Marine Land Lease Amendment Request.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem. I do the same thing.
Yeah. I guess let's make a motion to accept the amendment or the land lease agreement for the Borough of Petersburg and 13 Marine.
Okay, is there a second?
I second it.
Second.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, I'd like to amend this agreement to approve an additional 20 feet to the north and 30 feet to the west of the current lease lines for a total of an additional 3,300 square feet.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
An amendment. Okay, and the reason for that amendment, the reason given to us by the clerk for that amendment was the state fire marshal requires that much area around the type of a structure that's gonna be there. So it's gonna increase the lease by, $817 a year, but the clerk has talked with, Mr. Pilar about it, I believe, and she can clarify if I'm wrong, and he's acceptable to this modification, so, I will be voting for the amendment as well as the main motion as amended. So that's my input. Any other input?
If I can, Mr. Mayor?
Member Lim?
Yes, for the manager, does the increase in size of this, does this still put this lease within, I'll say the confines for the time, but of where we eventually want to go with that Scow Bay property?
Through the mayor, Assemblymember Lynn, yes, this tracks well with the future development there at Scow Bay.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other, discussion on this, lease amendment? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes?
Chelsea.
Yes.
You.
Okay, the 13 Marine Land Lease Amendment request has been approved unanimously. That brings us to the next item on the list, which is federal priorities. I'd entertain a motion to approve the federal priorities as presented.
So moved.
Second. Motion's been made with the second. Discussion, and there's a list of the federal priorities that, Manager Giesbrecht and our federal lobbyists, have asked for approval of. This is the draft 2022 federal priorities list.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, if I might?
Member Lynn?
Yes, down under healthcare, item 1, and I'm just talking now about a word change. Mr. Hofstadter brought to my attention that we have in there the renovation and replace. It isn't what we're asking for here is not a renovation. It's a new construction for the Petersburg Medical Center is what it is. Can we just make that change, or would you like me to make a motion to make that change?
I think we should do it with a motion on the second.
Okay, I'll move to change the wording in under item 1 under healthcare from renovate, replace to new construction for Petersburg Medical Center.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, there's been a motion on the second to amend this, list to redo the wording under healthcare item 1. Any discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Taylor. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
and Jay.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment with the wording under healthcare, section 1 passes unanimously. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Any other proposed amendments to this federal priorities list? Hearing none,
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if it's not an amendment, it's just a comment, or are we there yet?
Sure.
Yeah, I was just curious, I know there's some concern about an $84 million hospital here in Petersburg, and I just, I want the public to know that before we go down this road, there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen within the community about whether or not this is a priority for the entire community. So I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the input. And I have a few questions about this topic as well that I'll discuss at a further meeting, but I'm in favor of this priority list. Any other discussion on this priority list? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we approved the federal priorities list as amended unanimously, 6-0. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, and I would like, with approval of the Assembly, to appoint Public Works Director Cotta as Petersburg's representative to CSWA, Southeast Alaska Solid Waste Authority, that's what that stands for, and Utility Director Hagerman as Petersburg's alternate to CSWA. The appointments are for a 3-year term and will expire January 31st of 2024. I'd entertain a motion to approve this appointment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Dave?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
And Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. So thank you, Carl and Chris, for expressing interest in that organization. Next item under new business is D, March Assembly meeting dates. Since we have a meeting on today, the 22nd, the next meeting would be a week from today. So it's been discussed whether we should, by motion and voting, change our meetings in March to potentially the 8th and the 22nd. So I'd entertain a motion to get this on the floor.
Mr. Mayor?
So moved.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made in the second, and I believe that is to change the dates from March 1st and 16th to March 8th and 28th and 22nd. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Any discussion?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Member Stan Gregor.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'll be voting for that. Just because having a meeting already next week, it removes time to get anything on the agenda, and if we do one on the 8th and the 22nd, that puts us back to get started again on April on the 1st and 3rd. So I like the linear simplicity of using this as a transition back to the 1st and 3rd meeting. So I'm in favor of it. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any other input? Clerk, call the roll.
Just a question.
Member Kinsinger.
Yes, just a question, Mr. Mayor. Will this work for your schedule?
It'll work for my schedule. I will be here on the 8th for sure. 22nd, I'm positive, almost positive I'll be gone, but I should be in phone range. Depends on whether we're fishing or not that day for an evening meeting. But if I can make it, I sure will call in. I have phone service there, so that isn't an issue, but, far as being home for the first meeting in April on the 5th, more than likely, but last year we were down there 3 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, it's the start of the fishing season, Member Kinsinger, so I'll try to make it. Thank you for asking.
Yes, I think if it works for all the other assembly members, I think this is the way to go.
Yeah, I think so too. It gives us time to get some topics on the next agenda. So I'm in favor of the change. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes?
Bob,
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have, oh, sorry. So was that, do we have a complete vote, Clerk Thompson?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I believe it's a 6-0 unanimous to change the dates of our meeting, to the 8th of March at noon and 22nd of March at 6 p.m. So that's the way it'll be. Okay, that's done. New business is over. Brings us to communications. There are, looks like a number of, communications that are listed on tonight's agendas. You could go online and read the input on many different topics. Thanks everybody for sending the correspondence in, and we will not be reading them as normal, as usual. I mean, we don't read them, so, people interested to see what the community members' concerns are, you could go on, the meeting agenda and find them. So, and I have no other communications to add to that. Any other assembly members have communications they'd like to add other than what's listed? Okay, hearing none. That brings us to assembly discussion items. Any assembly member comments this evening?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll pick up with the theme that I had last time of kind of briefly respond to some of the people who took time in to call us tonight, and I think I'm just going to grab onto two pieces from the calls we received. One is just a simple answer that the positive cases we have in town, they're real. To say otherwise, I think is harmful to the community and and disrespectful to those who are sick. And second of all, a comment was made about the school and some of the closure that occurred. I by no means ever speak for the school, but having worked for the district, I think I'm on safe territory by saying that all of our teachers, administrators, aides, etc., want our kids in school, and so do parents. And I just wanted to thank the school district for being mindful and deliberate in their thinking. They want their kids back in the building too, but they're also right now balancing the health and safety of both students and staff. And I don't envy those decisions that they have to make. And I just wanted to thank them for their efforts. And I was disappointed by kind of hearing that being questioned, so I thought I'd address it. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have comments this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Tremblay.
Yes, thank you. I'm finding myself needing to take a deep breath before speaking more and more this time of year in February. We can feel spring kind of coming at us, and we just, whatever issues we have before kind of gets exacerbated. So I just want to invite everybody to take that deep breath. I say that in part because today the Assembly received an email where somebody called us poison that needed to be removed. And this past weekend, somebody told me to, quote, go back to Oregon, a state I've never lived in, but I'm sure it's great. So I think we could use a few more deep breaths as we navigate this time and place. And I also wanted to touch on, I gave this comment around this time last year to mark the anniversary. So February 19th, 1942 is the anniversary when President Roosevelt signed the executive order that eventually led to Petersburg sending some of its neighbors to prison camps in the lower 48 because of where they or their ancestors immigrated from, just because the federal government told us to. And I think of that a lot this time of year as I think of my own policy decisions, which are all made with the health, safety, and liberty of our community in mind. Today's move to Code Red didn't automatically close any business. It issued guidance information for businesses to act accordingly to the threat levels that we are experiencing. Businesses can disregard if they so choose, as well as event organizers, but I hope they don't disregard those warnings because they run the risk of putting members of our community at risk. And I just want to remind us all too that this space we're in right now is a changing space. It's not forever. We're building immunity to this new virus as a community, and it's amazing that we're already at 50%. The goal is 80, and if anyone wants to get on that waiting list, that number is 772-50-5545. I'm an enthusiastic, unabashed promoter of this vaccine. There might be people listening who are part of the 10 to 15% that won't get it, but they'll be kept safer by the community immunity that we can develop. Just like my grandpa Buzz helped eradicate polio in his role as a Rotarian, I'm here urging my neighbors to get their shot to help keep each other safe. I wanted to touch on the point a caller made about the 99% quote survival rate, which is actually in the United States, the death rate is 1.7%. And I bring that up because that number made me emotional when I was waiting at the gym after getting my shot. When I was thinking about the alternative of what that space could have been used for besides the group vaccination, and that's because 1,000 people at that point roughly had received the vaccine, and with that 1.7% death rate in the United States, that would have meant 20 people of our community would have died. And Mexico's rate, for example, of death is actually 8%, and they're probably closer to what we have healthcare infrastructure-wise. So just thinking of what that could mean, and the fact that the alternative is that you get these shots, it's pretty remarkable. It's a miracle that we're at this stage, and it is amazing to be in the 21st century, and I'm very grateful for it and for many other reasons. And, we as the Assembly are always here for reasonable input as we make these decisions. We're building the plane midair, and we're doing the best we can. So we're going to be talking a lot about COVID policies tomorrow in intricate detail, but I just think having our feet on the ground when we actually look at the face of this is really important, because we're also tired of this. I am so tired of this. But we don't get to abdicate our responsibilities to this community because we are tired of the weight that they put on us. So we are all very tired of this. I understand people are frustrated, and people are getting information from a lot of different places right now that send them a lot of different directions. But overall, I just want to thank everybody who's doing work to keep each other safe and following the steps that we all know by heart by now. And I set myself a little 5-minute timer, and I'm just about up. So thank you, everybody, for your time this evening and for our meeting tomorrow.
Any other Assembly members have comments this evening?
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the school district for all the hard work that they're doing to, keep the schools open. If you go back and look at the letters we've received from folks for the last several weeks or months, we've got it really, really good here in Petersburg. I love living here. This is a great place to live. When you look at places around the country, we're very fortunate to have kids in schools and businesses open and, and restaurants open. I think we're very fortunate, and I don't want that to get lost in all the dialogue that goes out there. But I just wanted to shout out to the school district. I've heard a lot of positive things from people from around the community who just talked about how hard the school district worked to stay open this week. Circumstances changed a few things, but they're going to work their hardest to get the kids back in school, and that's a huge dynamic in this community. So I just wanted to say thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other comments by Assembly members this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Member Kinsinger.
Yeah, short and sweet. Everybody's sick of COVID. I'm sick of it. Wear a mask, get a vaccine, and we won't be talking about this in 3 months.
Thank you. Any other Assembly members have comments? Okay, that brings us to item B under Assembly discussion items, and that's recognitions. Any recognitions by staff or Assembly? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? I think we all wanna adjourn. Okay, we'll see everybody tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Talk to everybody. Yep, bye.
Thanks.